Thank you for watching this first edition of the HbbTV webinar series in 2024. Welcome, and we can already say that this is probably one of the biggest webinars of this series because we've got about 250 people who registered, so that is quite a lot. So welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining us, and we have got a great topic for you. Of course, being reflected by the strong interest, it's the HbbTV Operator Application, or as we know it as the OpApp. We're going to look back at the development of this specification, and also there is some news with this recent specification update, and we're going to have an exclusive insight into the first commercial application using the new specification update by Freely in the UK. The speakers today will be starting with Arne Redl, Senior Systems Engineer of HD+, a subsidiary of satellite operator SES over here in Germany. You might recall Arne has been part of a webinar in the past, I think in 2019, when the OpApp was first commercially rolled out by HD+, what's the first platform operator using the OpApp. And we'll be hearing about what's been happening since then from Arne. Then we'll hear from Poole, Lead Research Engineer at BBC Research and Development, a bit more general information on the OpApp and what you can do with it. And then we're moving to the UK at Everyone TV. You've probably heard about Everyone TV, a joint venture by the BBC, ITV Channel 4 and Channel 5, where public broadcasters uniting for a new TV platform called Freely. And you'll hear all about Freely from James Jackson, who's the Director of Technical Strategy at Everyone TV. And then we move over to Jeff Hunter, the Chief Architect of YouView. So we go a bit deeper into the technology, and Jeff has brought his colleague Alexis with him. So welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining us. And just before we get started, as usual, the formal line, the presentations represent the views of the presenters and their companies and not necessarily the views of the HbbTV Association. Two further remarks before we start. First of all, this webinar is recorded and will be made available on the HbbTV Association's website shortly. So if you like to share that with colleagues, you'll be sent the link automatically since you registered for this session. And also, as usual, please submit your questions, your comments to our speakers through the chat box, and we'll discuss them at the end in the last 15 minutes of this 60-minute live session. Excellent, let's get started, and over to, I think, Munich, where Arne is waiting for us. Hi, Arne.
Hi, just give me a second to find the right. Yes, I hope it's the right.
Yes,
Perfect.
it's the right one.
So very warm welcome also from Munich. So I would like to give you today a short a recap and of course also outlook of our HD+ operator application, which we introduced already in 2019. So already some years ago. So yeah, first a quick look back about HD+. We started in 2009 already with HD broadcasting. 2015 we introduced the first UHD channel, and 2019 then really a big milestone for HD+. We introduced our first operator application for our satellite product. And then later in 2021, we introduced another operator application for IP only. In the meantime, we launched additionally HD+ to go, which is a pure streaming offering for mobile devices. So the operator application is especially for HD+. Important to get the operator look and feel, to get our own look and feel on TV sets. This is mainly done with the replacement of certain UI elements for HD+. It's mainly the EPG, the channel list, and the now next banner. As you know, the main difference to regular HbbTV applications is mainly the lifecycle management, having the app persistently installed and running, and yeah, as already said, UI replacements, but we are also having some additional UI elements and of course some additional features which may not be present on a regular TV UI, but I will come to that later. A second very important reason for us is the integration of a CA client, and here I think we have a perfect match with our OpApp, because the OpApp is somehow steering the CA client, so the integrated CA client wouldn't be possible without an operator application. And on the other hand, the OpApp is giving the CA client the UI interface, for example, notifying the user about the subscription status and so on. Yeah, how it's looking like when you try or when you want to install the OpApp of HD+. There are some preconditions. One precondition is, of course, being in Germany, having Germany as the selected country, and the TV must be connected to the internet. Of course, you also need a corresponding TV set with HD+ already integrated. Additionally, you may need the reception of the Astra 19.2 signal, which is important to have the HD+ OpApp. But even if you don't have satellite connection on certain TV sets, you can activate then the HD+ IP OpApp. And you can do this in the first time installation, but also in the later installation. How it's looking like in the first time installation, these screens, to be honest, I have already shown in the previous webinar, but it's still valid. So the steps 1 and 2 are part of the firmware, of the middleware of the TV, and part 3 and 4, step 3 and 4 are then already part of the OpApp UI. More or less the same applies for a later installation. Here you're coming, for example, from the home screen or the App Store. So step 1 and 2 are again part of the middleware, and step 3 and 4 are then already part of the OpApp. So I already mentioned this, our operator application is replacing some native UI elements of the TV set. For us, it's mainly the electronic program guide, it's the Now Next banner and the channel list. And on the right side, you have two pictures of one is the EPG, of course, and one the channel list. So that's the, let's call it old UI. And here, this is a screen about some additional UI elements we introduced with the OpApp. So it's the home bar. So you're having, for example, information in there of your subscription status. You have access to the app settings and other quick entry points for important functionalities. This is the UI we had so far, at least till November, but in November now we started introducing a new UI. And here one really important key message is we, with the OpApp specification and of course also our own specification, we are able to roll out the new UI and new user experience to all TV sets, to our whole legacy base. We started rolling out already in November, and the rollout will continue in 2024 till we really have the new UI, the new OpApp version on all TV sets in the field. And in the following slides, I will give you a short outlook how the new UI UX will look like. So first of all, the top layer navigation is slightly changing. So it's not having any more the home bar I previously showed. We are having now a top bar with the most important features. So you're always starting in LiveTV, but you are also from there you have direct access to the new home screen, to the guide, and to the search. I will show you now the following slides. So the EPG is only slightly reworked. It's more or less the same UI and same functionalities. The channel list is has already much more changes. We changed here from a a vertical navigation to a horizontal navigation, and also our detail pages. So the detailed information for every program is completely reworked, also based on complete new metadata we could introduce with the new OpApp version. Also, slight changes are done in the search. It's a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more intuitive, I would say. And yeah, a real cool, I think, new feature we introduced with, or we will introduce with the new version of the OpApp, it's time shift. So on the most channels, you're now able to pause the live TV to up to 120 seconds, 120 minutes, sorry. So it's, and this is really a new feature we will introduce, or we are currently introducing with the new OpApp version. The restart is, yeah, it's more or less the same feature we introduced already in 2019. So there are, I would say, almost no changes, except of course the new look and feel a bit. And yeah, what we also completely new introduced in this new version is the so-called home screen, including a lot of content recommendations, which are changing on a daily basis, and of course with some TV tips. Yeah, then at the end, I shortly, I already mentioned it, we also introduced an operator application for HG+IP, so on a pure IP basis, but it has more or less the same look and feel as we have it on satellite. We have here 80 channels. Of course, on satellite you have a little bit more than 80 channels, but still 80 channels, and I think that's the most important channels for Germany. And otherwise, the look and feel is absolutely like on satellite, except one thing, and here we are coming already to the summary. One thing still missing, it's the possibility to show regular HbbTV applications on live OTT channels. So, but this will now, or this is fixed with the new OpApp version. So we are keen also to have this, or to work with the new version of the OpApp specification. And yeah, the other thing is, and that's what I already said, and that's really exciting for us, based on the OpApp specification 1.0, we really were able, and of course in combination with our own specification, we were able to roll out now, or we will be able to roll out our new OpApp version to the complete legacy base. And I think that's really a great learning so far, that we still have not to do any changes in our host legacy base. Yeah, that's so far from HG+. So I think it's time for the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Arne. Very interesting look into, well, the first operator who was actually employing the OpApp specification for their service. And as you can see, the OpApp can turn the smart TV set of a customer basically into the look and feel of the operator, and always sometimes called a virtual set-top box. And now we've seen also that it can add a long missed function to DTH satellite TV, which is, you know, pausing, replaying, and you know, time shifted TV, all these things, finally adding the missing bits to satellite TV. I think that's really an exciting feature, and of course, coming from a satellite operator like you, perfect example of how to add value and improve the TV experience for the viewers. So thank you, Arne. Let's move on to our next speaker, and we're going over to the UK, where Chris Poole from BBC R&D is waiting for us with a bit more general information on the OpApp specification and the recent spec update. Welcome, Chris.
Hi. Okay, so let's get started. So why Okay, why update the specification? It sounds like it can do an awful lot as it is. Well, two reasons really: learning from experience and to address some limitations. So some of those kind of learnings are around the kind of life cycle. So there's now some more flexible update options for the OpApp deployed in the field to allow for different variants of the OpApp being deployed simultaneously and arranging the update paths for those. There are some more kind of entry points defined for the OpApp to, based on learning from HC+, reducing the need for private extensions to the spec. There's also an option, if the device supports it, to allow the OpApp to remain running in additional circumstances so that you can return to the TV viewing mode in a faster fashion. Some user experience improvements around allowing the operator application to overlay the TV picture to provide additional information or highlights problems or changes in the metadata and so on. So there's a few more circumstances under which the operator app is allowed to display transient channel banners and so forth. Some improvements around the exit key, which had some predefined behavior before that wasn't always appropriate. And there's a new option to allow use of the terminal's own parental PIN prompts from the OpApp as well, so that the user only has to kind of understand one PIN number and one way of dealing with parental controls on their television. And then on the limitations, well, the OpApp now has access to dedicated persistent storage, not subject to the constraints of the persistent storage available to regular HbbTV apps. There's also support for an OpApp to be installed directly from a CI plus CAM without needing connection to the internet. There's a mechanism to communicate with regular HbbTV apps to facilitate some single sign-on use cases. And there's much improved equivalence between linear channels delivered over IP and broadcast. And that's really the area that I'm now going to kind of focus on as something that's particularly important to us in the UK in the context of Freely, which you're going to hear about later. So the original OpApp spec does allow for OpApps to present IP services, as you heard from Arne. But those are limited in a few ways. Although the OpApp can give the impression of having a linear channel that can appear within the guide that the OpApp presents to the user, the TV knows nothing about those IP services. And that means that they can't appear in any remaining UI elements provided by the TV manufacturer, and also they can't have any associated regular red button HbbTV applications. It also means that any controls like audio language selection and things like that that the TV might provide from remote control buttons or on the UI probably don't work correctly, and that's another limitation. Also, there's back in 2018, there was no support in HbbTV for the media source extensions, which means that IP services couldn't be provided with an application layer, a JavaScript dash player, which is many organizations' preferred way to deliver media for kind of interoperability reasons. So the new OpApp spec introduces the concept of operator application presented channels. And these are channels where the OpApp takes full responsibility for the media presentation, and yet the TV remains fully in control of the channel list. So the TV knows all about the channels that are available and manages that integrated channel list. So how does this kind of break down in a bit more detail? So the TV manages the channel list. It also manages the concept of the currently selected channel. It handles starting and stopping of kind of red button applications, regular HbbTV applications. But when an operator application presented channel is selected from that channel list, then the TV calls up to the OpApp to play the media for that channel, and the OpApp then handles all of the other kind of requests to change audio tracks or whatever. So what does that leave the operator app responsible for? Well, it has to implement the API to allow that control to happen. And when an OpApp, or rather during the time that an OpApp presented channel is selected, the OpApp is responsible for finding the media, for doing any user authentication that hasn't already been done at installation time, to acquire DRM licenses, to manage the playback of the channel's media using a JavaScript dash player, and the OpApp can choose whether this is kind of playlisting a number of things or delivering a live stream or a bit of both or whatever. It's completely up to the OpApp what media actually constitutes that channel. And the OpApp is probably responsible also for rendering subtitles if a JavaScript dash player is being used. So how do these channels get discovered? Well, the spec allows for two main ways in which this can happen. One is if the TV and the platform support DVBI metadata, then there's a defined mechanism for indicating that particular channels in the DVBI service list are operator application channels and which OpApp is responsible for presenting those. Of course, the service list may include broadcast channels and potentially even natively presented IP services as well. And there's also an option for a proprietary equivalent, such as the precursor to DVBI that's been used in the UK for a little while for Freeview Play and was also being used for Freely. So again, it's down to what formats the TV devices and the platforms support. There's also an option for the OpApp to add additional channels to what it presents to the user and provide metadata about those to the terminal. That option doesn't expand the TV's channel list, but it does allow transient presentation of additional services as well, and still allowing the control of those from the TV UI. So just in a little bit more detail under the hood, how does this work? So here's an illustration of the applications at the top calling through HbbTV APIs, ultimately down to some TV components that managed selection and playback of broadcast channels and possibly IP native fast channels or whatever, and that being controllable also through the manufacturer UI through this route. So what changes? Well, we add an additional type of channel, essentially the OpApp presented channel. There's some implementation there by the TV manufacturer, but ultimately once one of those is okay, and all accessible through the standard HbbTV APIs and through the existing UIs. And then when one of those channels is selected, then the TV manufacturer's implementation calls up through this new API to a linear channel player component within the OpApp, probably making use of a JavaScript dash player. And just briefly, that API consists of things like selecting channels, pausing, selecting particular components, going one way and calls down the other way to update the TV on the status of the channel, media position, and so forth. So finally, really, users of TVs today for broadcast channels will find potentially various things that kind of overlaid on the screen. And one notable thing about that is that subtitles are generally overlaid directly on top of the video and appear behind any other kind of UI elements, such as graphics from a regular HbbTV application or an OpApp. So one thing that the specification has had to address is a means by which the OpApp can present the subtitles in the correct position. So to facilitate that, the OpApp now has access to two kind of windows, if you like, in web parlance, windows or tabs, and is able to render subtitles directly over the video whilst having those appear as the user would be used to seeing them below any red button apps and the OpApp principal kind of UI. And there's even an option for the terminal to present UI elements over the top of that if it wishes to. So with all of that, those crosses turn to ticks, and we end up with a situation where we can have IP delivered services with a completely consistent look and feel and behavior and capability to broadcast channels, and that applies both in a sort of hybrid environment with both broadcast and IP, and also to kind of IP only situations. And the benefit of the OpApp managing the presentation here is that the OpApp deals with managing the presentation of a media from a number of content providers, but the TV manufacturer only has to integrate one operator app. So to a certain extent, it's kind of breaking down the kind of the many-to-many sort of explosion that you get with trying to deliver lots of different IP services onto lots of different manufacturers' devices. Okay, and that's all from me. So passing on to the next.
Excellent. Many thanks, Chris, for these insights. And let's move on to James, also in the UK from Everyone TV. And while we're in the transition, please make sure you do keep sending us your questions. We've got a couple already, and there's room for more. So please use the chat box, and we'll be addressing your questions at the end of this live session. Welcome, James.
Welcome. I know you can see my the wrong screen, and
yeah, it's the other one. Okay, let's move on to the right screen with the presentation mode, and then we are ready for the Freely.
Do you now see?
There we are.
No, you still.
No, it's perfect.
See
no, it's right.
You do.
It's right now. There's a little delay always, but now it's fine. Thank you. And,
so I'm going to talk a little bit about the sort of commercial requirements that have driven Freely and how we get there. But I'm going to start off noting that this is an international audience, explaining a little bit about the UK and where we come from. So Everyone TV, my organisation, is owned by the biggest public service broadcasters in the UK, BBC, ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5. And for just about 20 years, we've been running the Freeview platform, a bit less than that, the FreeSat platform. And over that period, we've been really successful. We've got 100% coverage via broadcast services. We're in about half of the TV households as the primary TV platform, or Freeview and FreeSat are in the UK. And we've sold well more than 100 million Freeview and Freeview Play and FreeSat devices. And the last 20 million or so we've sold have been HbbTV enabled devices, and so we're perhaps the biggest HbbTV platform anywhere in the world. We do all of that very, very intentionally through partnership and collaboration, not just with broadcasters, but with the manufacturers and the retailers who drive the sale of the TVs which support the functionality that we utilize. And that's really important for the model that we operate. So we're not blind to the fact that, of course, the UK market is changing and changing rapidly, and it has been doing for some time. It's a very competitive market, and in that world, it's a very internet connected market. That's a driving force behind everything that's been happening, obviously, here and everywhere else. In the UK, in the last year, I've got full stats for almost every TV was a smart device. And going beyond that, we also see from a range of different forecasts an expectation that not only are homes consuming more and more TV over IP, more and more homes are not using a broadcast aerial, whether a satellite dish or a DTT aerial, to receive their TV. They're just ending up in an IP-only TV household. And it's in that context that our shareholders have responded, looking essentially at how they build something which meets the needs of those increasingly IP TV households. And that's what Freely is all about. We've been working on it for well over 3 years. We sort of first started talking about it publicly in September last year. We announced in December that our first launch partner would be Hisense, who in the UK market are a really big and fastest growing brand in terms of the number of TVs they sell. And last week we announced that Redl would be launching devices. And for anyone who doesn't know Redl, at least in the UK market, they're hugely important. In many years, they're the OEM that sells the largest number of TVs in the UK market, although across maybe 20 different brand names. So very few of their devices are sort of obviously identifiable as Redl first, because they often have other market-specific names. If I start then commenting really that we're not doing this from a standing start. Freely Play has been in the UK market since 2015 as an HbbTV platform. That we've already got a huge number of devices out in the field which provide a enhanced broadcast linear plus VOD experience to all of those TVs. And we've done that in partnership with the manufacturers. But there were some things we wanted to do differently with Freely. Perhaps the most important feature is free to view IP channels to every device. And we wanted to do that without a subscription and without a requirement to plug an aerial into the TV. We didn't just want to do that. We wanted to make the whole experience as seamless for consumers as possible, as consistent as possible across different devices, and as intuitive to use. And I'll talk about some of the things that sort of drive each parts of that. In terms of seamlessness, we wanted basically IP channels and broadcast channels to look the same to the consumer with no distinction as far as the consumer is concerned in how they use the TV or how they find the channels. In terms of consistency, one of the challenges we've had with Freely Play is both us and the manufacturers have had to do things, and it's resulted in a sort of somewhat varied experience from one Freely Play device to the next in terms of content discovery and TV guides. And also an experience which is often frozen in time and we can't evolve further. And then thinking about the sort of intuitive, we really wanted to make TV work as simply for the consumer as possible to make all the journeys to content as easy as possible. Now, Chris was just talking about some of these factors, but in thinking about how to do Freely using HbbTV, we had to think about different ways we could have moved forwards. One of the ways we could have moved forwards would have been to sort of build everything using a regular HbbTV app. And I know there are some platforms around the world which provide a TV guide, largely using a sort of an HbbTV app which is consistent on every channel, broadcast channel, or possibly in the future IP channels. But there are some drawbacks to that, which I won't drill into too much because largely the other options start to offset these. Another option would have been to go with the original or the sort of slightly updated version of the OpApp specification. And as Chris has talked about really well, that's really good at generating the consistency that we wanted. It's really good at reducing some of the burden for manufacturers. Indeed, some of our manufacturer partners encouraged us in that direction to say, well, why don't you use an operator app for what you want to do? It's probably the ideal approach. And what we realized that just from the IP channel stuff that wasn't quite perfect. So we've ended up going down the new operator app specification, and that solves all the problems as Chris has shown, particularly around that seamlessness and for the consumer between IP channels and broadcast channels and having the same functionality everywhere. We're fairly confident it's going to support all of our current and at least our known future requirements at this moment in time. It has had a few drawbacks in terms of the time it's taken us to get ready for it, but I think we're confident it's worth that. So this is what I'll describe as my most technical slide, and it's not at all technical really. It's an attempt to show really what the Freely Operator app is doing. And I think Jeff, who's coming on to talk after me, will probably go into this in a little bit more detail and show you a little bit more under the covers. So don't worry too much about anything you see here. But it's worth emphasising that it's the pink boxes on this slide that show the bits that define the experience provided by the Operator app. There's a core sort of full screen area which you'll see about the TV guide and the live and on-demand discovery experience, and I'll show you a bit of that. Then there's an enhanced channel banner, I'll show you that, and I'll show you how it works. And behind the scenes, whenever you're playing back an IP channel, there's also, we're using an embedded -JS IP linear channel player. And that then interfaces to the red boxes, which are shown off the sides of this diagram, where on one side you've got sort of metadata and what we call our channel list management, but that's our proprietary IP channel list delivery mechanism. It also deals with broadcast channels as well, and deals with some clever stuff to do with swapping HD and SD services in a regionally sensitive way. And then we also work with all of our content providers to provide their IP video streams, which come into the -JS video player that sits within the OpApp. And on top of any of these apps, you can run a regular HbbTV app, and you have all the functionality you want. So moving on from the technical diagram, it's probably useful just to look briefly at what Freely looks like. And this is an example of, I suppose, the sort of primary jumping off point for most users into the Freely experience. It's what you see when you're watching a linear channel, whether it's broadcast or whether it's IP. And it's the mini guide which gets superimposed over channel viewing. We've, again, tried to make it as intuitive and easy to use as possible. We want it to feel like normal TV. This replaces any mini guide that would have been there from the manufacturer. Of course, this provides the functionality to do things like changing channels, but it also provides some of the functionality that Arne has talked about for the first time in the UK, and which we're providing to the viewers for free. So an example is restart. For most content, you'll be able to restart it, albeit by jumping out of this app and into the broadcaster's own player applications. But that is not functionality which is deployed by all broadcasters on the Freeview Play platform at the moment, and it will be coming to all broadcasters on the Freely platform. Another functionality that we provide for IP channels is the ability to pause and resume. Again, a feature that HD Plus has had, and we do that within the Operator application itself. In addition to that, we provide the ability to sort of go on and explore more about either the content you're watching or content related to what you're watching. So there's the ability to sort of dive deeper, get more information about the program, see more episodes or related episodes. And there's the option there, and there are literally something like 60,000 hours now of on-demand content available from our content providers, which are available on demand and accessible from within this experience. So a huge amount of content is available on demand on top of the linear content. Just briefly, I'll show you the TV guide. Again, we've tried to keep this, as I suppose, as intuitive and well understood by consumers as possible. Yes, there is some additional metadata here and images and additional functionality if you want to use it to do things like restart services from here. But we're very aware that it's important to support the needs of, I suppose, a traditional linear audience who are still very familiar with this type of grid-based TV guide. But an additional part of the application is what we call our sort of full screen discovery area. And we're very fortunate with existing Freeview Play partners in having a means of entry to that experience by what we call partner remote control buttons. So we expect to have, and we do for Freeview Play devices, have buttons on the remote control that take you into this experience. And this mixes live TV discovery, sort of applications available from the content providers, and then a rich sort of content-led discovery experience with, again, editorially curated a content experience inside here, which tries to surface up popular and valuable from a public service perspective content to all consumers who are using the experience. We're really pleased with what we've built so far together with our partner YouView, but we're also really pleased with the ability to sort of evolve this going forwards with an operator app in the way that Arne's been talking about the HD Plus experience. That's a really important part of what we hope to do with this in the future. So I'm going to wrap up there in terms of what I've got to say. I'll let Jeff go on and talk a bit about how this has been built, and I'll finish there. Thank you.
Thank you, James. One last question. When is the Freely service launching? I believe Q2, is that right?
Yes, we've definitely said it's launching in the first 6 months of this year, and I'm very confident we will be launching in the next few months. I'm not going to put a date on it today.
Okay, I'm a journalist, I'm supposed to ask that, but anyway, thank you very much, James, and let's move on to Jeff and his colleague Alexis, and they're going to tell us a bit more about the architecture of Freely.
Indeed, let's get presentation.
We can see the presentation, maybe put that into presentation mode, and then we are ready to go. Excellent.
Okay, we are UK-based company working out of London. We've got about 200 plus staff. We're a full stack engineering company, so we do client software, user experiences, middleware, cloud backend platform, automation, and data insights, and we're 24/7, 365 operation. So we've got 10 plus years experience of building operator experiences across HTML, Android, Apple TV. So when everyone TV asked us to build the Freely Operator App, HbbTV Operator App for them, that was great for us, absolutely delighted to do that. And we were able to bring a lot of collateral to the table to start, particularly about our experiences of operator user experiences that sit alongside device platforms, but also a backend platform that we're able to reuse, and a lot of experience about developing for consumer devices with resource constraints, embedded devices. Now, starting in on the HbbTV development, a lot of it is just standard HTML, and your developers can make quite a lot of progress just using browser-based environments, which are very, very helpful in terms of their tooling. But they're going to want to get access to real devices to start testing some of the more complex features, and particularly a lot of the OpApp related features and the features that Chris was talking about. So we put a lot of emphasis on rig-based development. So this allows developers to remotely access devices that are held in a rig, where they can book, configure, and control those devices over a very simple web interface. And you can see some example here in the control screen here. And that really solves the problem of every developer having to have a sample of every device directly accessible to them. And when it comes to televisions in particular, you may find it quite hard to get enough samples. And you also may find that your developers don't want to have a sample of every television in their home if they're working in a hybrid capacity. So we use a range of IR controls and then capturing the output from the devices over electronic interfaces, typically HDMI, but sometimes LVDS. But obviously, some of you are already thinking, wait, my HbbTV has no HDMI output. So one of the things we did quite early in the project was look at how we solved that problem. The solution we came up with was using a camera-based capture system. That then presents further new challenges. To capture the whole of the TV screen on a planar camera, you typically have to have that lens quite far away, and that takes up rig space. So we looked at a solution using a fisheye lens, and you can see the kind of capture bottom left. That's then a problem because the image is distorted and potentially not orientated correctly. So we put in place a set of picture processing techniques that we can use to then get back to something that looks quite like what you'd actually get from the HDMI outputs. But if your developers have now got access to TVs, they still need to get their applications running on those TVs. If you've got a good relationship with the TV manufacturer, you may be able to find a way of getting the applications loaded in some engineering capacity, for example, USB side loading. But otherwise, you're going to need to build a system that relies on taking advantage of the standard OpApp techniques. That really involves you having some kind of key exchange between yourself, the operator, and the manufacturer, so you can pass assets back and forward. The OpApp can be verified by the device. And if you've got a manufacturer who doesn't want to provision your OpApp in the factory, which is going to be quite likely, then you also need to provide some sort of bootstrap hosting location for the first version of the app that you install. And then once you've got a second version, once you've got your OpApp actually installed and running, you can start to do some more sophisticated things, because your OpApp can talk to your own management platform, at which point you can start to do things like targeting groups, supporting trials, or potentially doing phased rollouts by only rolling out to certain numbers of devices until you're confident with your build. So this is all so far so standard OpApp, but obviously part of what we've had to work on is some of those new extensions, and in particular around video playback. So that's what Alex is now going to talk to you about.
Right. Thanks, Jeff. So as Chris mentioned earlier, you have multiple graphics planes, in fact multiple HbbTV windows in this system. So you've got the Operator Application browser window, which is showing you the operator user interface, and that's only visible when it's in the foreground. Then you might have your connected grid button or your broadcast related application. And then behind that, you then have the video window, and the video window is responsible for the video playback, kind of clues in the name, but also subtitles. And this means that it's then consistent with what you get from broadcast, where subtitles are behind connected grid button app, which are behind UI components of the TV. So that's why you end up with this sort of three window model, which then gives you consistency between what you get from IP delivery and broadcast delivery. And so, next slide. So it's a few different versions of this diagram today. This is my version of it. So when the application starts, the OpApp starts, and its responsibility is to launch the video window. So it tells the device to start the video window from the same zip file as the actual OpApp. And then when it starts, it connects to this WebSocket server and tells the HbbTV platform that it wants to be able to present TV or IP channels. Once that's configured, then when you select a TV channel, if you select one that's broadcast, the HbbTV device handles that and will display it directly. And if it's an IP channel, it sends commands to the video window over this WebSocket. So it's always the terminal that's in control of starting, stopping, pausing, and resuming of the video from the playback from the video window. However, you tend to need more than that communication between the OpApp and the video window. There's a W3C API called PostMessage, which lets you send events between windows. And so we use that so that the OpApp and the video window can communicate. So examples is if in the user interface you change subtitle settings or audio description settings, then the video window instantly changes and they're all kept in sync. And if you get a problem with video playback, the video window can tell the main OpApp UI why it went wrong, because what you can do with HbbTV is a relatively limited set of error codes, and you can't provide any additional context. So, for example, to be able to give a better user experience or backhaul data, we actually send additional information back if there's a channel tune failure. And hopefully, if after all the problems of getting the PowerPoint to start, we have a video, and so this video will show playback of a broadcast DTT channel, and then switching to an IP channel. And as James said earlier, the whole point of this is to make it as simple as possible for the user. And if I hadn't told you they were a DTT channel and IP channel, you probably wouldn't know because they just look the same. And that's kind of the whole point of it, is to make it seamless to the consumer. So, will we be lucky? So, okay, so this is now displaying ITV1 from DTT, and now this is now switching to the IP version of the same channel. And this is using the Atlantis rig. So this is to be able to control the television remotely. Yeah, through the rig. So yeah, so it's a very short video, but basically gives you a rough idea of the fact that it just looks the same, whether it's DTT or IP delivery.
So hopefully that's given you a bit of a feel about some of the work we've done and some of the challenges that we've encountered.
Thank you very much, Jeff and Alex. And now we'll have a couple of minutes time for the questions, and you can see them on the screen now. You see we've got lots more that came in than the ones I've just picked, and I think there's now only time for maybe one question per presenter. I've marked them in bold, so if you please all join us back on the stage. And James is still missing, then let's address the questions. Arne is there. Hi, James. Now, Arne, the first question is for you. What is the minimum memory usage requirement when running the HbbTV app? Because obviously it's quite an advanced specification, and can a low-end device support such memory requirements, Arne?
So we honestly, I don't have fully in mind what's our requirement. I think it's 20 megabyte. I think it's 20 megabyte.
Okay.
And again, it's so also the new version is not using more memory than the old version. So we didn't change anything in our specification for the new OpApp version.
Okay.
Answers the question, but I'm not 100% sure about the current usage of about our memory requirements, but it's not so high as you might think.
It's not as high, yeah. I think that can be gathered from that. I think the next one is one for James, because you did mention your partnerships with TV brands and manufacturers. What are the businesses that the OpApp will open for TV manufacturers? So when you announced a collaboration with Redl and Hisense, I think, what's in for the manufacturers in those deals?
I think there are two parts of the sort of business model that works with Freely and Freeview Play before it. The first part is we support those manufacturers in marketing their TVs in the UK. And that is the sort of business model of Freeview Play before it, and now Freely, of essentially promoting TVs with this functionality in. I think the other thing that Freely gives them for the first time, and it's really important, is it gives the buyers of their TVs free access to IP channels. And if you remember back to the statistics I put up on screen, there are a huge number of TVs going into homes which are not having an aerial or satellite dish plugged into them. And for those TVs, it's providing additional content to the buyers of those TVs without a subscription. So it is really good for sort of customer satisfaction from that perspective. But
Okay.
I know we have deep relationships with the manufacturers on this.
Okay, maybe one for you as well, James, or if Chris would like to respond, will Freely be available on Google TV, Tyson, Web OS, so that's other operating systems from TV manufacturers? How can it interact with these other TV OS or ecosystems, or how to handle the potential conflicts with other TV operating systems?
I think this is probably one more for me than it is for Chris. The short answer on that is it absolutely can coexist with other TV ecosystems. And indeed, I think it won't come as a surprise to those on the call, I'm sure, that other TV operating system ecosystems are looking for business opportunities within TV user interfaces. And I think the important thing about Freely is it's designed to sort of coexist with such ecosystems rather than to replace them. It is not that there is no space in which you can discover, for example, Netflix or Disney content on these devices. They typically have a home screen, which the manufacturer or the operating system provides, which has access to those global subscription, video on demand services and sometimes advertising funded services in those ecosystems as they're described here. But they're also within, I suppose, the traditional national TV viewing and discovery experience, the TV guide, the mini guide, the places where people are looking for, in the UK, British content from channels that they recognise and love and watch billions of hours of a year. That's also there. So both exist and both work, and absolutely we can work with all of these operating systems.
Doesn't take away anything. It's more an add-on or complementary service that actually adds value. Last one is for Jeff or Alex. Can video be shown in all three windows? You've seen the slide that you've shown, or only in the video window?
So typically there's only one or two the ability to decode one or two videos in the hardware. However, from a logical layer, yes, it can switch between different layers. So if you think about an existing conventional HbbTV device, the APIs allow an orderly transfer between the TV displaying a channel and the HbbTV app, stopping that tuner and playing back its video. Effectively, it's an extension of that. So you've got three different parties that can handle that orderly transfer of who is playing at any particular time.
Okay, thank you very much. And sadly, there's not enough time for all of these questions, but as I was saying, just feel free to address any of the speakers in a way of your preference, and I'm sure they'll respond. And Freely and the OpApp will, of course, be a great feature at this year's HbbTV Symposium and Awards, which is going to take place in London in the UK. You've probably heard about that in November this year. It's co-hosted by the HbbTV Association and Everyone TV. So we're looking forward to that one, and you'll receive more information on the venue and the exact date shortly. As usual, the webinar series is there for you, so please submit any ideas you have for further topics that we can address from the whole community of Connect TV, especially HbbTV, of course, to email webinar@hbbtv.org, webinar@hbbtv.org, and we're happy to give you feedback. Also, please follow the HbbTV Association on X, formerly Twitter, and LinkedIn for updates on what's new and going on in the HbbTV world. Thanks for watching. Thanks to the presenters. Have a good time and see you next time. Bye-bye. Take care.